AITA for revenging my neighbor over my driveway. My name is Denise, and I live with my partner Leo in a small, quiet row of homes on the edge of town. It's not a fancy neighborhood, just modest houses with tidy lawns, a place where people mostly mind their own business. My driveway is narrow, but it fits both of our cars perfectly, and until a year ago, I never thought twice about it. But then came Carl. Carl and his wife moved in 2 houses down about 18 months ago. At first, I thought he was just a little too friendly, the kind of neighbor who lingers too long at the mailbox or makes jokes that aren't really funny. But soon, I realized Carl wasn't just nosy, he was entitled. It started with a single moment. His cousin's car was sitting in my driveway one afternoon. When I went over to point it out, Carl gave me that half smile of his and said, "Oh, don't worry, she's just dropping something off. She'll be gone in a minute." Except it wasn't a minute, it was an hour. And by the time she left, Leo had to park halfway down the street. I told myself not to make a big deal out of it. We were new neighbors. Maybe he just didn't know better. But I quickly learned that Carl knew exactly what he was doing. Within weeks, it became routine. A friend of his here, a brother-in-law there, some random delivery guy who just needed a place to stand while unloading. I'd pull up after a long day of work, balancing heavy grocery bags, only to find a stranger's car blocking my space. Every time I confronted Carl, he gave the same dismissive answer. "Relax, they won't be long." But it was never just a moment. The breaking point came on a stormy Thursday night. I had just finished a 12-hour shift. Rain hammered against my windshield as I pulled into the street, exhausted, with a bag of takeout growing cold in the passenger seat. And there it was, a massive white pickup truck parked dead center in my driveway. Not off to the side, not even angled politely, just straight across the middle, like they owned the space. My heart sank. I pulled over, headlights still on the truck, and grabbed my phone. When Carl answered, his voice was casual, almost amused. "Oh yeah, that's my brother-in-law. They'll only be there a couple hours. Just park on the street. It's not a big deal." Something in me snapped. I told him, "It is a big deal. This is my property. Move it." But Carl just chuckled and said, "Don't be difficult, Denise. Just let it go for tonight." I sat there for a moment, rain pounding on the roof of my car, my food getting colder by the second. Then I made a decision. I called a tow truck. 20 minutes later, the SUV was gone. I carried my food inside, sat at the table, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had taken back my space. But the night wasn't over. The pounding started about an hour later. I opened the door to find Carl on my porch, red-faced, with his brother-in-law fuming behind him. His wife hovered near the sidewalk, arms crossed, looking mortified. Carl's voice was loud enough for the whole street to hear. "You didn't have to take it that far, Denise. You cost us $300 for no reason." I held my ground. "You told me it wasn't a big deal, so I treated it like it wasn't a big deal." Then I closed the door. But even as I leaned against the wall, heart racing, I knew this wasn't over. For a couple of weeks, things seemed to calm down. Carl didn't speak to me when we passed each other, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he had learned his lesson. But then, little things started happening. One morning, I found muddy tire marks across the edge of my driveway, leading nowhere, as if someone had pulled in halfway just to make a point. Another time, I noticed a car parked directly in front of my house, not blocking me, but close enough to feel deliberate. When I glanced out the window, I caught Carl standing across the street, watching me unload groceries with a smirk. Leo told me to ignore it, but I couldn't shake the tension. It felt like a quiet war, Carl testing how far he could go without breaking the rules outright. The worst was the day I came home early and saw Carl's nephew sitting in a car, engine running, idling in my driveway like it was a hangout spot. I knocked on the window and told him to leave. He rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath, but eventually drove off. That night, I confronted Carl directly. "Your family keeps using my driveway. This has to stop." Carl leaned on his fence, arms crossed, that smug grin plastered on his face. "You think you scared us with one toe? Denise, you can't control the whole street. People will park where they want." I felt my chest tighten. "Not in my driveway, they won't." He laughed, a low, mocking sound. "We'll see." From that point on, every encounter was a fight, even if words weren't spoken. He'd slam his trash cans louder when I walked past. He'd rev his car when I pulled into my driveway. Once, I even found an empty soda can tossed at the edge of my lawn. Nothing too blatant, but just enough to remind me he was there. The street began to feel divided. Some neighbors gave me sympathetic looks, while others avoided eye contact, clearly not wanting to get involved. But the tension was growing, thick and suffocating. And deep down, I knew Carl wasn't finished, and neither was I. After the tow incident, things went strangely quiet for about 2 weeks. Carl didn't speak to me, didn't wave, didn't even give me one of his smug half-smiles. At first, I thought maybe, just maybe, the whole mess was over. But then the little things began. One Saturday morning, I walked outside to get the mail and saw muddy tire marks smeared across the edge of my driveway. Not blocking me, not enough to prove anything, but just close enough that I knew it wasn't an accident. It felt like a message. That evening, I caught Carl taking out his trash. Our eyes met for only a second, but the corner of his mouth lifted in that same infuriating smirk. He knew I'd seen the tire marks. He wanted me to know. I went back inside, and Leo could see I was rattled. "You can't let him get in your head," he told me. "He's trying to mess mess with you. But I wasn't just rattled. I was done. The next day, I drove to the store and bought a small outdoor security camera. Nothing fancy, just a little motion-activated one I could mount under the eaves and point toward my driveway. I installed it myself that afternoon. I didn't tell Carl. I didn't even tell Leo at first. It was my quiet little line of defense. For a few days, nothing happened. And then it did. One evening, the camera pinged my phone with a motion alert. I opened the app and watched, jaw tight, as Carl's teenage nephew pulled halfway into my driveway. He sat there idling for nearly 20 minutes, blasting music so loud the bass rattled through the audio on the recording. At one point, he even leaned his chair back, feet on the dash, like my driveway was his personal lounge. Then he finally drove away like nothing had happened. The next morning, I went straight to Carl. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get emotional. I just pulled out my phone and showed him the video. "This," I said calmly, "is your nephew in my driveway. This isn't going to keep happening." Carl rolled his eyes like a bored teenager. "It's just a kid being a kid. Stop being so uptight." Something in me almost snapped, but instead of arguing, I smiled. "Okay," I said quietly. "If you won't take it seriously, maybe someone else will." That afternoon, I uploaded the video to our neighborhood Facebook group. No insults, no drama, just the clip of the car idling, along with a simple caption. "Friendly reminder that private driveways are not for general use. Thanks." The reaction was immediate. Comments poured in within the hour. Neighbors I barely knew started chiming in, backing me up. Several admitted they'd also had issues with Carl's visitors parking in front of their houses, blocking them in, or even idling in their driveways. One woman wrote, "I thought it was just me. Thank you for posting this." Another neighbor said she'd been too nervous to confront Carl, but she'd had the same exact problem. By evening, the post had more than 30 comments, nearly all siding with me. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't standing alone. But the real moment came the next day. I was watering the front plants when I heard shouting 2 doors down. Carl's wife was on the porch, her voice sharp and furious, and I could hear every word. "You're embarrassing us. The whole street is talking about you. Do you even care how this makes us look?" Carl tried to argue back, but she cut him off. "No, Carl, you think this is funny? Everyone thinks we're trash because you can't respect people's property." I froze, pretending to fuss with a flower pot while my heart hammered. For the first time since this all began, Carl's grin was gone. When he finally noticed me standing there, his face turned red. He slammed his front door so hard the windows rattled. But I wasn't smiling, because even though his smugness had cracked, I knew this was only the beginning. Carl wasn't the type to back down quietly. And now, with the entire neighborhood watching, the tension was about to get a whole lot worse. After the camera incident and the Facebook post, things were tense but quiet for about a week. Carl avoided eye contact. His wife stopped waving at me. Even their kids would scurry inside when they saw me watering my plants. But I knew Carl. He wasn't going to let it go. He wasn't the type to just admit defeat and move on. So I decided to stay one step ahead. That weekend, Leo and I drove to the hardware store and picked up 2 cans of bright reflective paint, the kind road crews use. We spent Saturday morning measuring out neat edges across the base of our driveway. Then, under the warm sun, we carefully rolled thick white paint across the concrete. Big, bold letters stretched across the boundary. "Private driveway. Do not block." It wasn't just functional. It was undeniable. Around midday, Carl came outside. He leaned against his porch railing, watching us with that smug grin plastered on his face. After a few minutes, he sauntered over, pretending to stretch, then sneered loud enough for both me and Leo to hear. "You really think paint is going to stop people?" Leo stiffened beside me, ready to fire back, but I raised my hand to stop him. Instead, I looked Carl straight in the eye and said calmly, "No, but the tow company told me it makes their job even easier." Carl's grin faltered for the briefest second, and then he scoffed, muttering something under his breath as he stomped back toward his house. But I wasn't doing it just for him. That painted line wasn't only paint. It was a statement, a warning, a permanent mark that said, "This is mine. Stay out." And I knew Carl hated it. The following week proved me right. Every time his family came over, their cars had to park further down the street. No more sneaky half parking in my driveway. No more just for a minute. They would pull up, see the bold white line, hesitate, and then reluctantly drive on. Carl couldn't stand it. One evening, I was unloading groceries when I noticed Carl pacing near the edge of his lawn, glaring at the painted line like it had personally insulted him. When I carried the last bag inside, he suddenly shouted across the street, "Do you feel better now? You happy, humiliating people." I froze for a moment, then set my bags down and called back, "Respecting boundaries isn't humiliation, Carl." His face turned beet red. "You're making this street miserable," he yelled. "Nobody had a problem until you started acting like a cop." By then, a few neighbors had stepped out of their houses, drawn by the shouting. Mrs. Palmer from 2 doors down shook her head and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Carl, stop yelling at her. She's not the problem here." Carl spun around, stunned. "Excuse me." Another neighbor, Mike, added, "She's right. We're all sick of your visitors blocking driveways. Maybe it's time you take responsibility instead of picking fights." For a moment, Carl looked like he might explode. His fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. But instead of answering, he stormed back into his house and slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to calm my breathing. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the rush of finally seeing the neighborhood speak up. For once, it wasn't just me versus Carl. It was me and half the street standing together. But the drama didn't stop there. 2 days later, I woke up to a loud knock at my door. I opened it to find a small envelope taped to the glass. Inside was a printed email from the Homeowners Association board. Apparently, Carl had filed a formal complaint claiming that my painted line was an eyesore and disrupted the visual uniformity of the neighborhood. I almost laughed. He couldn't win against me, so now he was trying to use the HOA to force my hand. But here's the twist. When I showed the board the security footage, the Facebook comments, and the growing complaints from neighbors, the president of the HOA replied, "Actually, Denise, the board supports what you did. If anything, you helped address a bigger issue." I kept that email safe. The very next weekend, I noticed something new. Carl wasn't smiling anymore. Every time he walked past the bold white letters on my driveway, he avoided looking at them. His guests stopped coming as often, and when they did, they parked way down the street, trudging awkwardly past my house with their heads low. For the first time in months, I felt in control again. And though I didn't say it out loud, every time I stepped over that painted line, I thought to myself, this isn't just paint. This is my revenge. But deep down, I knew Carl wouldn't let this be the end. The way he glared at me through his blinds, the way his jaw clenched whenever our paths crossed, I could feel it. At first, I really thought it was over. After the painted line, Carl's driveway game stopped. His visitors parked down the block. He stopped making smug comments. He wouldn't even glance at me when we passed each other. For a while, it was quiet. But Carl wasn't the type to lick his wounds in private. He couldn't stand being embarrassed. He couldn't stand being the one people were talking about. And he definitely couldn't stand that it was me who got the last word. That's when the whispers started. One morning, while checking the mailbox, I ran into a neighbor, Janice. She leaned in and said softly, "Carl's been telling people you're unfriendly. Says you're causing drama where there doesn't need to be any." I sighed, not surprised. Carl couldn't win with rules, so he was trying to win with reputation. At first, I brushed it off, but then little comments started to trickle in from other neighbors. "I heard you've had some disagreements with Carl. He said you're trying to turn the street against him. Is everything okay?" Carl was spinning his story, painting himself as the victim of a controlling neighbor who was making life difficult for everyone. He wanted people to see me as the problem. What Carl didn't realize was that I had been quietly building support all along. The camera footage, the Facebook post, the painted line. I never raised my voice, never lost my temper. Every step I took, I stayed calm and clear. People saw that. And Carl, well, people had seen his temper too. One evening, I came home and saw him on the sidewalk, red-faced, arguing with two of our neighbors. His voice carried across the street. "I don't know why everyone's acting like I'm the bad guy here. It's a driveway. Who cares if someone uses it for a minute?" One of the neighbors, Mike, shot back, "Carl, it's not just a minute. You've been doing this for years. We're tired of it." Another neighbor added, "Don't drag us into your mess with Denise. She's right. You can't just treat private property like it's public." I stood there quietly, groceries in hand, watching the scene unfold. Carl spotted me and went silent for a moment, his face twisting with frustration. Then, without another word, he stormed back into his house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. The irony hit me right then. By protecting my own driveway, I had unintentionally sparked something bigger. My neighbors had started standing up for themselves too. Carl's little empire of entitlement was crumbling. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more changes. People who used to park carelessly now respected boundaries. Neighbors who used to avoid getting involved were suddenly speaking up when Carl's relatives blocked sidewalks or left trash in the wrong bins. Carl wasn't just fighting me anymore. He was fighting the entire street. And here's the twist that really sealed his downfall: his wife. I overheard them one night through my open window while I was sitting on the porch. She was furious, her voice sharp and cutting. "Do you realize what you've done? Everyone hates coming here now. My sister doesn't even want to visit because she's embarrassed to park on the street. You've turned this into a circus, Carl." Carl barked something back, but she didn't back down. "This isn't Denise's fault. This is your fault. You can't stand being told no." The next day, she didn't wave or smile at me like she used to. But I noticed she also didn't defend him anymore. When Carl's relatives showed up, she made them park at the very end of the block. Carl's little war had cost him not just the neighborhood's patience, but also his own household's peace. The fallout was brutal. He had tried to shame me, but all he did was shame himself. His reputation, the one he tried so desperately to protect, was in pieces. For the first time since this all began, I felt like I didn't even need to fight anymore. The street was fighting for me. But deep down, I knew Carl wasn't going to disappear quietly. Men like him don't just swallow pride and move on. No, Carl was waiting, stewing, plotting, and I had a feeling his next move was going to be louder than all the ones before. It finally happened, and in a way I never expected. Last weekend, instead of Carl pounding on my door with anger, it was his wife who showed up. I remember the knock, gentle, hesitant. When I opened the door, she stood there with her arms crossed, not in defiance, but almost like she was holding herself together. Her voice was soft, and her face looked worn, as if weeks of stress had carved new lines into it. "Denise," she began, I want to apologize for everything." I froze. Of all the things I thought I'd hear from that household, those words weren't on the list. She went on, almost rushing to get it out. "It's been tense around here. Carl's pride. Well, you know how he is. He made it worse, and I know it's been hard on you. I just want to say, you were right to stand your ground. We should have respected your space from the start." I just stood there, stunned. My heart wanted to accept her words immediately, but another part of me, the part that carried groceries in the rain while strangers sat in my driveway, wanted to hold back. But then she added something that broke the wall I had built. "He's been fighting everyone, Denise. Not just you. The neighbors, even me. Our kids are tired of it. They don't want to invite friends over anymore because they're embarrassed by the way he acts." And she paused, lowering her eyes. "I'm tired too." Her honesty hit me harder than any of Carl's shouting ever had. It wasn't just about me anymore. This battle had cracked something inside their home, and she was the one trying to pick up the pieces. I nodded slowly and said, "Thank you. That means a lot." She managed a small smile, almost like a weight had lifted from her shoulders. "I just want things to be peaceful again, for all of us." After she left, I sat on the couch for a long time, thinking. I realized something important. I had never wanted a war. I had only wanted respect. And for the first time, it felt like maybe, just maybe, the message had finally sunk in. Since that day, the street has been quiet. No cars in my driveway. No muddy tire marks. No loud idling trucks outside at night. Even Carl himself has changed, or maybe not changed, but retreated. He doesn't glare at me anymore when we pass. In fact, he barely looks at me at all. It's not friendliness, but it's not hostility either. It's something in between, almost like defeat. The other neighbors noticed too. At our last small neighborhood gathering, people joked that Carl finally learned the rules. He wasn't there, of course, but his absence spoke volumes. And yet, the tension didn't disappear overnight. About a week after his wife's visit, I caught Carl standing at the end of his driveway, staring at the bold painted line across mine. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight, like he was chewing on words he wanted to say but couldn't. I braced myself, expecting a comment, a sneer, maybe even another round of his smug dismissal. But instead, he just shook his head, turned, and went back inside. That was the last time I saw the fight in him. It was like he finally realized he couldn't win this battle without losing everything else. His neighbors, his family, his pride.
Here's my take. Carl tried to play king of the cul-de-sac, but you exposed that his crown was made of cheap plastic. The tow truck was your opening cannon blast, the security cam your sniper scope, the Facebook post your rallying cry, and the painted letters? That was your declaration of sovereignty. Each move was calm, precise, and impossible for him to spin in his favor. The best part? You never lowered yourself to his level. He yelled, you stayed cool. He schemed, you documented. He spun lies, you let receipts do the talking. That contrast made him look like the tantrum-throwing toddler of the block, and eventually even his own family lost patience. Your neighborly chess strategy had two beautiful ripple effects. The street found its voice. You weren't just protecting your driveway, you gave everyone else permission to stop tiptoeing around Carl's nonsense. Carl's household cracked. Pride might have been his fuel, but it also turned his own living room into a battlefield. His wife's apology was basically her waving a little white flag on behalf of the family. If you want lasting peace, I'd suggest one thing. Don't let the quiet trick you. Keep the camera rolling, keep your HOA emails handy, and keep those painted lines fresh. Not because Carl's winning any more battles, he's not, but because men who hate losing often look for desperate, sneaky last moves. And the humor in all this? Carl thought he was starring in a gritty Fast and Furious, Suburbia edition, but really, he ended up as the grumpy side character in Denise Teaches the Neighborhood Boundaries 101. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments.
AITA for taking revenge on my neighbor over their dogs? My name is Clara, and I live on a quiet suburban street called Maple Grove. I have 2 dogs, Milo and Daisy. I've spent years training them, basic obedience, recall, even socialization with other animals. I take pride in keeping them well behaved, and I make sure they're always inside when neighbors are around. I walk them at precise times, keep them on leash in public areas, and even attend small training classes every few months to reinforce their skills. My dogs aren't perfect, but they are controlled, predictable, and safe around others. Across the street moved a family a year ago, the Harpers. They have 3 dogs, a large Labrador, a German Shepherd, and a small terrier mix. From the moment they moved in, it was clear their dogs were wild, barking constantly, chasing each other across the yard, digging enormous holes, and even lunging at passing pedestrians. It was chaos. I tried to ignore it at first, hoping they would settle down after the first first few months. But every week, the situation escalated. The first real incident that made my blood run cold happened one early morning. I was letting Milo out for his routine stretch when I noticed the shepherd pawing at the bottom of the shared fence. His paws scraped the boards so hard that a few of them bent under the pressure. Milo barked sharply, Daisy growled low in warning, and the shepherd leapt back, only to lunge again. His snarling and aggression made my chest tighten. My dogs were safe inside the fence, but I knew it was only a matter of time before something happened. Someone could get hurt, my plants could be destroyed, or worse. I wanted to avoid confrontation at first. I didn't want to start a feud with neighbors over dogs. I spent the next weekend preparing my yard. I installed wire mesh along the fence, hung outdoor privacy screens to block visual triggers, and planted a thick line of tall evergreens to act as a buffer. I told myself that would be enough. I even rearranged my garden furniture and added motion-sensitive lights along the perimeter, thinking maybe the added effort would discourage the dogs. It wasn't. Within a week, I caught the shepherd leaping over the mesh through a small gap I hadn't noticed, pawing at the soil near Milo and Daisy's favorite digging spot. The Labrador barreled across my flower beds, flattening the tulips I had planted, while the terrier darted around, yapping furiously and knocking over small garden decorations. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. This wasn't just a minor nuisance anymore. They were actively invading my property, and their owners had no concern for consequences. I sent a polite text to the Harpers. "Hi, I noticed your dogs are getting into my yard through the fence. Could you please make sure they stay contained? I'm concerned about safety for everyone." The response came almost instantly, dripping with condescension. "Clara, your dogs bark at everything. Our dogs are just being dogs. Maybe train yours better." I stared at the screen, stunned. They had not only refused to take responsibility, but they also blamed me. Over the next few days, the texts kept coming, accusations about how I was making life difficult, harassing them, and creating unnecessary tension in the neighborhood. The worst part was the smug tone in every message, as if my concern for my own property and pets was unreasonable. It was at that point I realized talking politely wasn't going to work. I decided to escalate, but strategically. I installed 2 security cameras along the fence line, discreetly positioned to capture every intrusion. Within days, I had footage of the shepherd clawing and digging at my yard, the Labrador trampling through my flower beds, and the terrier chasing Milo and Daisy. Each clip was time-stamped, crystal clear, and undeniable. The videos weren't just proof, they were a shield. I shared them with the local animal control officer, who told me to continue documenting each incident. They emphasized that repeated infractions could lead to fines, and that this family's negligence was creating a legitimate safety hazard. That made me feel a tiny bit empowered, but I wanted more. I wanted the Harpers to realize that the community was watching, that their behavior had consequences beyond my yard. The next incident sealed my decision. One afternoon, I watched from my kitchen window as the family walked their dogs in the neighborhood park across the street. One of their dogs pooped on the grass, and without hesitation, they walked away without picking it up. I grabbed my phone and recorded everything. Then, I posted the video to the neighborhood Facebook group, along with a calm message reminding residents about responsible pet ownership and the importance of picking up after animals. Within hours, dozens of neighbors commented, sharing their own experiences with the Harpers' dogs, some more extreme than mine. The reaction was immediate. Suddenly, the Harpers' name was everywhere in the group. People discussed their negligence openly, questioned their responsibility as dog owners, and speculated on how long this pattern had been going on. I didn't need to add commentary. The evidence spoke for itself. Even the Harpers noticed. That evening, I started receiving defensive, almost hysterical messages. "This is unfair. You're making us look like criminals. Stop sharing things online. Our dogs are fine. You're harassing us and turning the neighborhood against us." I stayed calm, typing back carefully, "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm documenting behavior that is unsafe for people and pets. That's all." But my calm didn't stop the Harpers from escalating on their end. Over the next week, they began trying to intimidate me, leaving notes on my door claiming I was sabotaging their family, taking their dogs to my side of the yard deliberately to taunt Milo and Daisy, and even parking their cars to block my driveway while walking their dogs. I knew they were testing boundaries, trying to see if they could force me to give up. I refused. Every intrusion, every trespass, every moment of chaos was documented on camera. I shared clips weekly with a neighborhood Facebook group and with animal control. Slowly, other neighbors began coming forward with their own complaints. One neighbor reported that the shepherd had chased her elderly cat down the street, another had caught the Labrador digging up her vegetable garden, and a third admitted their child had been frightened by the terrier mix running loose at high speed. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about Milo and Daisy anymore. I had accidentally become become a voice for the neighborhood, a shield for anyone who had been too intimidated to speak up. And with that realization came a mix of pride and unease. I hadn't sought revenge, but the Harpers' escalating chaos had forced me to act. Every post, every video, every call to animal control was a small battle in a war I hadn't expected to fight. Even with all this, tension hung in the air every time I stepped outside. I could feel the Harpers' glare from across the street. Every bark from their dogs felt like a challenge. Every movement in their yard made me tense. The neighborhood, once quiet and serene, had become a stage for a simmering feud. I knew it could explode at any moment. And yet, through the cameras, the posts, and the evidence, I began to feel a sense of control. Not just over my yard or my dogs, but over the situation itself. For the first time, I realized that confrontation wasn't the only answer. Documentation, patience, and exposing the truth could be just as powerful as yelling or fighting. It was exhausting, emotional, and at times frightening, but I wasn't backing down. Milo and Daisy were safe. My garden was protected. And slowly, the neighborhood was starting to take notice. After my post went viral in the neighborhood group, the atmosphere on Maple Grove shifted almost overnight. It was subtle at first. A few more neighbors nodding at me when I walked Milo and Daisy, a stray comment about how chaotic the Harpers' dogs had been, but the momentum grew quickly. One evening, while checking my phone before bed, I got a WhatsApp message from a neighbor named Jason, who lived 2 houses down. His message was hesitant at first, almost apologetic. "Hi Clara, I've been following your posts about the Harpers' dogs. I wanted to say, my cat, Whiskers, has been chased into my garage by that same German Shepherd more times than I can count. I've been too nervous to say anything before, but seeing you speak up gives me hope." I felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone else was willing to step into the fight. Jason went on to send several clips. The first showed the shepherd lunging aggressively at his cat, which was desperately scrambling up a tree. Another clip showed the Labrador running straight across his manicured lawn, sending flower pots tumbling, while the terrier mix darted in and out of the hedges, barking furiously. The most shocking video was of the shepherd chasing a jogger's small dog down the street, nearly causing the person to trip. Every clip was timestamped, clear, and undeniable. We started a shared folder, meticulously organizing every incident by date and time. I realized this was bigger than just my yard. It was a neighborhood-wide safety hazard. Every day brought another clip. The terrier mix digging through a neighbor's garbage, the Labrador knocking over children's toys, and the shepherd constantly pawing at fences, trying to escape. The evidence was piling up. By the weekend, Jason and I presented the compiled footage to the community association. We didn't sugarcoat anything. We labeled each clip, included times, and highlighted the risks: property damage, threats to pets, potential injuries. I also drafted a careful email to the neighborhood mailing list, attaching the videos and calmly explaining the situation. I made it clear that my goal was safety, not revenge, though a part of me knew this would sting the Harpers' pride. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of neighbors wrote back, some sharing their own encounters. One elderly woman explained how she had stopped using her front porch because she feared the shepherd running past her yard. Another parent admitted her child had nearly been knocked down by the Labrador while walking to school. People expressed gratitude, relief, and a surprising amount of anger. For the first time, the Harpers were not isolated in their ignorance. The community was watching, and the Harpers noticed. Their texts started coming in, aggressive and panicked. "Clara, you're making us look bad. Stop harassing us or we'll go to the HOA. This is ridiculous. Everyone is on your side because you're spreading lies. If you post anything more, we will take formal action against you." I took a deep breath each time before responding. I didn't want to escalate with insults, but I needed to assert boundaries clearly. All of this is documented. I'm not spreading lies. I'm keeping a record of unsafe behavior. This is not harassment. It's safety. Every video has a timestamp, and you are responsible for your pets. Over the next few days, the tension became almost unbearable. I could feel their eyes on me when I walked Milo and Daisy. The Harpers' dogs were now more restless than ever, barking and lunging at the fence as if they could sense my growing confidence. Meanwhile, other neighbors started approaching me in whispers, asking if I would forward them clips for their own reports, offering to testify if the HOA called a meeting, even volunteering to monitor their dogs if needed. By the end of the week, the HOA sent a formal warning to the Harpers. If their dogs continued roaming unsupervised or causing disturbances, fines and formal action would follow. I felt a small but potent surge of satisfaction. The first ripple of justice had arrived. The Harpers were on notice, and for the first time, it felt like the neighborhood might finally be on my side. But the situation wasn't over. The Harpers began trying new tactics, keeping the dogs indoors, but letting them bark incessantly, staring across the street at me while walking their dogs, sending indirect threats through other neighbors. It was clear they were trying to regain control of the narrative, and now it was personal. Jason and I stayed vigilant. Each evening we checked the shared folder, added new clips, and planned our next steps. I realized this was more than a battle over dogs. It had become a war of accountability, patience, and strategy. Every bark, every chase, every broken flower pot now had meaning beyond the chaos. It was evidence, leverage, and a statement. We were not backing down. And as I lay in bed at night, Milo curled at my feet and Daisy snoozing by my side, I felt a quiet thrill of anticipation. The tide was turning, and the Harpers had no idea how firmly we were prepared to hold them accountable. It had been nearly a month since Jason and I first compiled the videos, and while the Harpers had started keeping their dogs behind fences, the tension on Maple Grove was far from over. I had learned quickly that controlling wild dogs was one thing, controlling their owners' pride and temper was another. One Saturday morning, I went to the park with Milo and Daisy for a quick run. I noticed something immediately, movement near the busy intersection at the park's edge. My heart sank. The Harpers' dogs were off-leash. The German Shepherd, clearly emboldened by months of unchecked chaos, bolted straight into the street. The Labrador followed, tail wagging recklessly, and the Terrier mix zigzagged behind them. A child on a bicycle suddenly appeared, pedaling too fast to stop in time. The Shepherd lunged toward the path of the bike, and I froze, my stomach knotting. I pulled out my phone and began recording as fast as I could, capturing the chaos. The child swerving desperately, the dogs barking and charging, pedestrians yelling, and the sheer panic on everyone's faces. Once I had the footage, I knew I had to act immediately. I sent the clips to the HOA, Animal Control, and our neighborhood Facebook group simultaneously. Within minutes, the messages pinged back. Comments started pouring in. Parents shared their own encounters, times their children had nearly been knocked down. Neighbors shared stories of broken garden fences, scratched cars, and even a delivery person who had been chased last week. The posts multiplied, each backed by either a photo, video, or witness account. The story went viral in our neighborhood in hours. The Harpers realized quickly they could no longer control the narrative. Their earlier strategy, blaming me or claiming their dogs were just being dogs, crumbled in the face of direct, undeniable evidence. Animal Control, who had previously been skeptical, issued multiple fines for neglect and unsafe behavior. The HOA followed with a formal warning letter, threatening severe penalties if the dogs were ever unsupervised again, and demanding proof of compliance. By mid-afternoon, the Harpers were at my door, red-faced, trembling with anger. The father waved his arms wildly. "Clara, you've gone too far. This is harassment, and you're turning the neighborhood against us." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Milo and Daisy sat calmly beside me, a living testament to what responsible pet ownership looked like. I met his glare evenly and said, "All I've done is document what your dogs have been doing. I've shared it so everyone, including you, can stay safe. If you choose to take action, that's on you. I'm not responsible for your negligence." The mother, clutching the leash, added a trembling, sharp-edged threat. "We'll see about your evidence. You can't just keep exposing us to the entire neighborhood." I held my ground, calm, unwavering. I didn't raise my voice, didn't step forward, didn't flinch. Silence hung heavy between us, punctuated by Milo's soft panting. Finally, the father muttered something under his breath, turned, and stormed off, slamming the door. The next few days were surreal. The Harpers seemed to retreat, confining the dogs behind gates and screens, walking them only on leash, and even muttering to themselves whenever they saw me outside. I continued to upload small, carefully curated clips whenever there was a minor incident, maintaining an unimpeachable record. The block felt different. The neighbors began to greet me warmly, the children rode bikes without fear, and the sense of tension that had hung like a storm cloud over Maple Grove began to dissipate. Jason and I shared a quiet high-five over WhatsApp one evening. It wasn't about gloating. It was a shared acknowledgement of persistence, strategy, and teamwork. "We did it," Jason typed. "Yeah," I replied, slowly, but we reclaimed our neighborhood. But even in that moment of victory, I knew the Harpers weren't completely defeated. They were smart enough to retreat, but not humble enough to admit wrongdoing. I also knew that maintaining safety would require continued vigilance. Each day became a careful dance, walking Milo and Daisy, monitoring the neighborhood, watching for signs of unrest, and keeping meticulous records. The real lesson had settled in. Accountability isn't loud. It's patient, precise, and relentless. Justice, when built on calm observation and undeniable evidence, doesn't need shouting or confrontation. It builds momentum quietly until those responsible are forced to face the consequences of their actions. And as I watched Milo chase chase a ball down the sidewalk that evening, I realized that for the first time in over a year, Maple Grove felt like a place I could finally call home, safe, peaceful, and fair. The Harpers may still resent me, but the community had seen the truth, and that truth could not be ignored.
Clara, you basically turned Maple Grove into a courtroom without robes or gavels, and honestly, it's genius. You didn't just protect Milo and Daisy, you built a fortress of evidence so airtight that the Harpers had no wiggle room left. My biggest suggestion for you going forward? Stay boring, and I mean that as a compliment. Let your neighbors keep remembering you as the calm, steady one while the Harpers look like they're auditioning for a reality show called When Dog Owners Attack. Humor aside, I think you've uncovered the golden formula for dealing with reckless people. Don't outshout them, outdocument them. It's less stressful, more powerful, and far harder to refute. If this saga teaches anything, it's that neighborhood diplomacy works best when wrapped in receipts, timestamps, and a dash of Facebook exposure. And, hey, bonus points for turning your security cameras into Maple Grove's unofficial Netflix subscription. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for refusing to sell my dad's house. Click here to watch it now.